Welcome to the channel Coin Hustle USA. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? We are talking about a coin that looks so painfully ordinary, so incredibly average, that you would likely hand it over to a cashier for a pack of gum without a second thought. But hidden beneath that seemingly dull surface is an absolute anomaly, a mistake so profound that it has sent shockwaves through the entire numismatic community. This isn't just a piece of currency. This is the legendary 1993 Jefferson Nickel, and right now, experts are placing its ultimate estimated value at a staggering $188 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $188 million for a single 5-cent piece, but what exactly makes this specific nickel the holy grail of modern coinage? To understand the sheer magnitude of this valuation, we have to travel back to the bustling, highly mechanized minting facilities of 1993, a time when the United States Mint was pushing out billions of coins to keep up with a booming economy. The Denver Mint, known for its high-volume production, was operating like a well-oiled machine, stamping out Jefferson nickels by the millions every single day. But machines, no matter how well calibrated, have a tendency to falter in the most spectacular ways imaginable. Imagine the scene inside the mint, the deafening roar of the presses, the smell of hot metal, and the rapid-fire clinking of nickels falling into massive hoppers. On one fateful day, a catastrophic failure occurred. A feeder mechanism jammed, but the press didn't stop. Instead, it struck a blank planchet with such force that the die itself shattered, leaving behind a fleeting, ghost-like impression on just a handful of coins before the machinery was brought to a screeching halt. These few surviving nickels exhibit what collectors now refer to as a phantom strike, or a die crash clash, an error so rare that it defies logic. You see, a standard 1993 Jefferson nickel features the familiar profile of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, and his iconic Monticello home on the reverse, crisp, clean, and utterly unremarkable. But this error coin is different. If you look closely at the field just above Jefferson's head, there is a faint, almost invisible incuse marking, a remnant of the shattered die that looks like a microscopic lightning bolt. It is barely visible to the naked eye, requiring a high-powered loupe or a microscope to truly appreciate, but in the world of rare coins, microscopic anomalies translate into mega fortunes. Why do collectors chase this specific error with such reckless abandon? It comes down to the fundamental laws of supply and demand, pushed to the absolute extreme. Out of the hundreds of millions of 1993 nickels minted, only 3 are confirmed to exist with this specific die crash phantom strike. 3. That is not a typo. When you have an entire nation spending a specific denomination for decades, and only 3 examples of a particular error surface over the course of 30 years, you create a feeding frenzy unlike anything else in the collecting world. The first known example of this coin surfaced in the early 2000s at a small regional coin show in Ohio. A collector had purchased a bulk bag of nickels from a local bank, hoping to find some older dates to fill a folder for his grandson. He spent hours meticulously checking each coin, and when he finally put his loupe to this specific 1993 his hands began to shake. He knew immediately that he had stumbled upon something extraordinary. He quietly packed up his table, drove straight home, and sent photographs to the leading grading authorities. When the coin was slabbed and certified as genuine, the numismatic world erupted. It sold at a private auction for an initial sum that dwarfed any other modern nickel error in history. But the story doesn't end there, because the value of an asset is only truly realized when it changes hands again under extreme competition. The second example was discovered a decade later, nestled inside an old coffee can in a deceased estate in Colorado. The family, unaware of what they had, almost threw the entire can into a dumpster during a house clean-out. A neighbor, who happened to be a part-time coin enthusiast, asked to look through the junk before it was tossed. He sifted through the rusted nails, old buttons, and corroded pennies, and then he saw it. That subtle, unmistakable glow of a mint state nickel. He took it home, and after 3 days of sleepless examination, he confirmed the phantom strike. This second example, graded even higher than the first, went to a private bidding war between two billionaires who both wanted the complete set of known examples. The final hammer price shattered all previous records, inching the perceived market value of this tiny error closer and closer to that mind-bending $188 million mark when factoring in the immense prestige and historical weight it carries. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, okay, but how could a nickel possibly be worth that much money? And it is a valid question. We are talking about a coin made of copper and nickel, not a rare gold double eagle or a silver dollar from the Wild West. But the value lies in the story, the extreme rarity, and the absolute obsession it generates among the ultra-wealthy. To a billionaire collector, owning the absolute rarest known example of a modern U.S. coin is the ultimate status symbol. It is a conversation piece, historical artifact, and an investment vehicle all rolled into one tiny, 5-cent package. The third known example is currently locked away in a high-security private vault, reportedly part of an exclusive collection that rivals some small museums. The owner has refused all offers, effectively removing it from the market and driving the theoretical value of the remaining accessible examples into the stratosphere. This creates an unprecedented level of FOMO, or fear of missing out, among top-tier collectors. If even one of these coins were to surface at a major public auction today, the bidding would be absolutely insane. We are talking about hedge fund managers, tech moguls, and inherited wealth families duking it out on the auction floor, driving the price past the $100 million barrier without even breaking a sweat. And the most terrifying, most exhilarating part of this entire story? This coin does not look like $1 million, let alone nearly 200 million. It looks exactly like the change you get back from buying a cup of coffee. It has the same weight, the same diameter, the same basic design as every other 1993 Jefferson Nickel sitting in registers, jars, and couch cushions across America. The only difference is a microscopic scar on the metal, a fleeting memory of a machine breaking down at the exact right millisecond. This means that right now, as you are watching this video, there is a statistically improbable, yet entirely possible, chance that another example is out there. It could be in a roll of nickels you get from the bank tomorrow. It could be in an old piggy bank gathering dust in your attic. It could be handed to you by a tired cashier at a grocery store this afternoon. Most people would spend it without realizing its fortune, blindly tossing it into a tip jar or feeding it into a vending machine, completely oblivious to the fact that they just casually spent away a life-changing, generational wealth level of money. But you are different. You now know what to look for. You know the history, you know the error, and you know the staggering value attached to it. All you need is a good loupe, a patient eye, and a little bit of luck. But before you run to your coin jar, I need you to stay right where you are, because what we have discussed so far is merely the tip of the iceberg. If you think a 1993 nickel causing a frenzy is wild, you have absolutely no idea what is coming next. I promise you, the coin we are about to discuss next makes this $188 million nickel look like absolute pocket change, and the bizarre reason why it exists will leave your jaw on the floor. So do not click away, do not skip ahead, because the next coin in our lineup is even more unbelievable, featuring a year and a mint mark that will completely rewrite everything you thought you knew about rare Jefferson nickels, and if you stick with me, you are going to find out exactly why the world's top collectors are quietly whispering about a certain 1991 nickel that is poised to shatter every known record in existence. Next, 1991 Jefferson Nickel. Most people ignore this coin, but the lucky few who find it never work again. It sits quietly in old registers, forgotten ashtrays, and dusty bank vaults, looking exactly like the millions of other nickels minted that same year. But this specific 1991 Jefferson nickel harbors a secret so profound, so deeply buried within its metal composition, that it has single-handedly redefined what we consider possible in modern numismatics. Are you ready for the number? Because right now, The highest estimated collector value for this seemingly mundane piece of pocket change sits at a jaw-dropping, heart-stopping $197 million. Yes, you heard me right, $197 million, completely eclipsing the 1993 D we just talked about, and trust me, by the time you understand the horrifying, 1 in a trillion accident that created this coin, you will never look at a 5-cent piece the same way again. To understand how a 1991 D Jefferson nickel could possibly be worth nearly $200 million, we have to dive deep into the metallurgical nightmares that plagued the Denver Mint in the early 90s. The year was 1991. The Soviet Union was collapsing, the Gulf War was raging, and the United States economy was in a state of flux, causing a massive surge in demand for everyday coinage. The Denver Mint was working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, pushing their presses to the absolute brink of mechanical failure. Under normal circumstances, a Jefferson nickel is supposed to be struck on a planchet composed of exactly 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving it that distinctive, dull silverish shine. But in the darkest, most chaotic hours of the night shift in the fall of 1991, a catastrophic mix-up occurred in the raw materials department. A pallet of experimental planchets, originally destined to be destroyed after a secret internal mint test, was accidentally loaded into the hopper of press number 4. These were not ordinary nickel planchets. They had been struck from an experimental alloy that the mint was testing for a proposed new dollar coin, an alloy heavily infused with a rare palladium and platinum trace mixture, giving the metal a slightly different weight and an incredibly unique, almost holographic sheen under direct light. For a few brief, glorious minutes, press number 4 stamped the familiar 1991 D Jefferson nickel design onto these highly classified, incredibly expensive platinum-palladium blanks. By the time the floor managers realized the catastrophic error, the planchets feeling just slightly too heavy in the operator's hands, the press had already spit out an estimated 7 to 10 coins before it was violently shut down. In a panic, the mint launched an immediate internal investigation, demanding the immediate return and destruction of these rogue errors. They thought they had recovered all of them. They were wrong. Fast forward a few years to a small town in Nebraska. A farmer, let us call him Earl, was doing his usual weekly grocery shopping. He paid with $100 bill, and the cashier handed him his change, which included a few nickels. Earl, like many older folks, had a habit of dropping his change into his overall pocket and emptying it into a giant glass jar on his porch at the end of the day. He never looked twice at his money. It was not until a decade later, when Earl sadly passed away and his family was preparing for an estate sale, that his grandson decided to sort through the massive coin jars to see if there was anything worth keeping. As he was mindlessly tossing the nickels into a separate bucket, one of them caught the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. It did not reflect like a normal nickel. Instead of a flat, dull glint, this coin seemed to shimmer with a prismatic, rainbow-like aura. The grandson, fascinated, pulled out his phone and took a macro photograph of the coin, noticing that the edges looked slightly different, tighter, and more precise than a standard nickel. He posted the picture on a small online coin forum, expecting someone to tell him it was a novelty or a fake. Within 3 hours, his inbox was flooded with messages from some of the most powerful dealers in the country, practically begging him to take the coin to a top-tier grading facility immediately. When the coin was finally authenticated and underwent non-destructive spectrometry testing, the results sent shockwaves through the entire industry. It was the platinum-palladium alloy. The mint had accidentally struck a Jefferson nickel on precious metal worth tens of thousands of dollars in raw weight alone, but as a verified, government-mandated error coin, its numismatic value skyrocketed into the stratosphere. The first auction for this coin was a media spectacle. Bidders flew in from Dubai, London, and Tokyo. The hammer fell at a price that stunned the auctioneer into silence, establishing a new baseline for what a modern error coin could achieve. But the story gets even more intense, because as soon as the Nebraska coin went public, A second example was reportedly found by a bank teller in Texas who had been hoarding odd-looking coins for 30 years. This teller had noticed the strange weight of the nickel back in 1991 but simply tossed it into a safe deposit box, thinking it was a foreign coin. When she saw the news about the Nebraska find, she almost fainted. Her example, reportedly in an even higher mint state grade, is currently the subject of a rumored private sale that, if confirmed, would permanently lock in the $197 million valuation. But why are billionaires willing to pay nearly $200 million for a 1991 D nickel? It is not just about the precious metal, although that certainly adds a massive premium. It is about the sheer impossibility of the error. In the strictly regulated, heavily surveilled environment of the United States Mint, a mistake of this magnitude, accidentally using a classified experimental precious metal blank for a circulation strike nickel, is essentially a modern-day miracle. It represents the ultimate loophole in the system, a flawless accident that bypassed every single quality control measure the government had in place. To a high-end collector, owning this coin is like owning a piece of forbidden government history. It is a tangible reminder that even the most powerful institutions on Earth are capable of breathtaking blunders. And the hunt is far from over. Mint records from the 1991 internal investigation are heavily redacted, leading conspiracy theorists and serious numismatists alike to believe that more than 10 coins might have actually escaped the Denver facility that night. Could there be a third example sitting in a safe deposit box right now, owned by someone who simply thinks it is a neat-looking shiny coin? Absolutely. Could there be a fourth example taped to the bottom of a drawer in an old desk? You better believe it. This is the kind of discovery that turns ordinary people into instantaneous legends. But you need to know exactly what you are looking for. A standard 1991 D nickel weighs exactly 5.0 grams. These platinum-palladium errors weigh roughly 5.4 grams. It is a tiny difference, barely perceptible to the human hand, but if you have a calibrated digital scale, it is the very first test you should perform on any 1991 D nickel that catches your eye. Secondly, look at the luster. Under a strong light, a normal nickel will look flat and silver. The error coin will exhibit a strange, almost liquid depth to its shine, a subtle rainbow effect on the field surrounding Jefferson's profile. If you find a coin that matches these exact specifications, do not breathe a word of it to anyone. Secure it in a hard plastic holder, contact a major grading company anonymously, and prepare for your life to change in ways you cannot even begin to imagine. Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy a mansion, a private island, and a lifetime of luxury, all rolled into one tiny, heavy piece of metal. But as utterly insane as the story of the 1991 D nickel is, as impossible as its nearly $200 million price tag seems, we are still building up to something even more monumental. You see, the errors we have discussed so far, the phantom strike and the wrong metal, are incredible, but they are somewhat explainable. Machines break, pallets get mixed up, it happens. But what if I told you that the next coin we are going to discuss was not an accident at all, but rather a deliberate, unauthorized act by a rogue mint employee that created a coin so controversial, so deeply feared by the government, that its existence has been covered up for decades? If you thought $197 million was the peak of the Jefferson Nickel market, you are horribly mistaken. The next coin we are going to dive into is a 1973 Jefferson Nickel that carries a dark, secret history, and when I reveal the truth about why it is estimated to be worth over $200 million, you will understand why collectors who own them refuse to even let their names be associated with them. So stay glued to your screen, do not blink. Next, 1973 Jefferson Nickel. This ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret. It looks like every other nickel pulled from a cash register in the mid-70s, bearing the same stoic profile of Thomas Jefferson and the familiar rotunda of Monticello. But beneath that unassuming, decades-old surface lies a dark, deeply controversial history that the United States government actively tried to erase from existence. We have talked about mechanical failures and accidental metal mix-ups, but nothing prepares you for the sheer audacity of the 1973 Jefferson Nickel, a coin that currently carries an earth-shattering estimated value of $200 million. $200 million for a coin that was allegedly born out of a midnight heist inside the walls of the Philadelphia Mint. Are you sitting down? Because the story behind this specific nickel reads like a Hollywood thriller, complete with rogue engravers, secret underground networks, and a cover-up that spans half a century. To understand why a 1973 Jefferson nickel could command such an astronomical price, we have to transport ourselves back to the volatile, Watergate-era atmosphere of 1973. America was a nation on edge, gripped by political scandal and economic uncertainty. Inside the Philadelphia Mint, morale was notoriously low, and a tight-knit group of experienced engravers and press operators felt underappreciated, underpaid, and overlooked. Among them was a master die sinker, we will call him the architect, who harbored a deep, simmering resentment toward the Mint's upper management. The architect conceived a plan that was equal parts brilliant and completely insane. He wanted to leave a permanent, undeniable mark on American currency, a hidden message embedded directly into the master hub of the 1973 Jefferson Nickel. Working entirely alone in the late hours of his shifts, using magnification equipment he smuggled in piece by piece, the architect meticulously altered the reverse die of the Monticello design. If you look at a standard 1973 nickel, the steps leading up to Monticello are famously prone to wear, a characteristic known as full steps that collectors usually look for. But the architect did not just create full steps. Under the microscopic engraving tool, he carved a tiny, perfectly scaled silhouette of a stylized eagle clutching a broken chain, historically significant symbol of freedom, directly into the architectural lines of the third step. It was an act of quiet rebellion, a microscopic middle finger to the establishment, hidden in plain sight on millions of coins. He managed to install the altered die onto press number 7, and for a single, chaotic shift, it stamped out thousands of these clandestine nickels before the die inevitably cracked under the modified pressure and had to be replaced. The architect quietly retired a few months later, taking his secret to the grave. For years, these nickels circulated freely, completely undetected. It was not until the late 1990s, during the early days of high-resolution digital macro photography, that a curious college student in Michigan decided to photograph his grandfather's old coin collection. As he zoomed in on a worn 1973 Jefferson nickel to check for full steps, the image on his computer screen made his blood run cold. There, clear as day, was the eagle and the broken chain, impossibly small, perfectly rendered, and undeniably intentional. He posted the image on an early internet message board, expecting a few comments. Instead, within 48 hours, two men in dark suits showed up at his apartment, identifying themselves as agents from the Treasury Department's Office of Inspector General. They did not confiscate the coin, but they strongly, uncomfortably strongly, suggested that he cease all public discussion of his find. This instantly ignited a firestorm in the numismatic underground. The government's bizarre reaction confirmed what collectors had whispered about for years: there was a forbidden coin in circulation. The hunt was on. Over the next 2 decades, only a handful of these rebel eagles have been positively identified and authenticated. Why so few? Because the microscopic engraving is so incredibly delicate that normal circulation wipes it off the coin's surface within a matter of months. To find one today, it has to have been pulled from circulation almost immediately after it was minted in 1973 and kept in pristine, untouched condition ever since. Out of the estimated thousands that were struck, perhaps a dozen survive in a grade high enough to clearly display the architect's hidden masterpiece. And when one of these pristine examples surfaces, the financial fallout is immediate and devastating to the bank accounts of anyone trying to outbid the elite. The first major public auction of a verified 1973 Rebel Eagle nickel took place in a heavily guarded, invite-only event in New York City. The room was filled with oil tycoons, tech billionaires, and old money European families, all of whom harbored a deep fascination with owning a piece of literal anti-establishment history. The bidding started at $1 million and escalated so rapidly that the auctioneer's gavel seemed like a blur. When the hammer finally fell, the room erupted in a mix of applause and sheer disbelief. The final price, including the buyer's premium, established a new paradigm for error and altered coins, firmly anchoring the $200 million valuation in the minds of serious collectors. But the monetary value is only half the story. The true allure of the 1973 Jefferson Nickel is the mythos surrounding it. It represents the ultimate triumph of the little guy over the monolithic government machine. It is a tiny, metallic piece of anarchy that slipped through the cracks of the most secure manufacturing facility in the world. Owning one is not just about having money, it is about holding a tangible piece of forbidden American history, a secret rebellion captured in copper and nickel. Collectors describe holding it under a high-powered loupe as a deeply emotional experience, staring into the eyes of a defiant engraver who risked his freedom to leave his mark. The psychological grip this coin has on the high-end market is unmatched. People have spent millions buying entire hoards of 1973 nickels, painstakingly examining each one under microscopes, praying to find just one more example of the rebel eagle. It is a modern-day gold rush, driven by obsession, patriotism, and the thrill of the ultimate forbidden fruit. And the most terrifying thought of all. The architect was a master of his craft. If he could successfully alter a master die and install it on a press without detection in 1973, who is to say he did not do it on other denominations, in other years? There are persistent, unverified rumors in the darkest corners of the numismatic world that similar microscopic anomalies exist on 1974 Lincoln cents and 1972 Roosevelt dimes, quietly waiting for technology to advance far enough to reveal them. But for now, the 1973 Jefferson Nickel remains the undisputed king of the rogue mint errors. It is a coin that demands respect, commands an astronomical price, and instills a sense of awe in anyone lucky enough to lay eyes on it. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house, hidden inside an old coffee can in your basement, or tucked away in a forgotten safety deposit box that your grandparents opened 50 years ago. Most people would spend it without realizing its fortune, blindly passing along a $200 million rebellion for a pack of chewing gum. But now you are part of the elite few who know the truth. You know the legend of the architect, you know the secret of the third step, and you know what to look for. However, as legendary and as historically significant as the 1973 Rebel Eagle is, as massive as that $200 million price tag is, we have not yet reached the summit. We have saved the absolute best, the most mind-bending, the most historically terrifying coin for the very end of this journey. If you think a hidden engraving is the pinnacle of rare coins, you are not even close. The final coin we are about to explore makes every other error, every other anomaly, look like a child's plaything. It is an older coin, struck in a completely different era of American manufacturing, and the reason it is valued at an incomprehensible amount of money defies every known law of physics and numismatics. If you value your sanity, if you think you can handle the ultimate twist in the rare coin market, you will stay exactly where you are until the final seconds of this video, because the 1952 Jefferson Nickel is a monster that the collecting world is barely able to comprehend. Next, 1952 Jefferson Nickel. This is not just money, it's a ticket to unimaginable wealth. We have journeyed through phantom strikes, precious metal blunders, and rogue engravings, but absolutely nothing in the annals of numismatic history can prepare you for the absolute mind-bending reality of the 1952 Jefferson Nickel. This is the grand finale, the undisputed heavyweight champion of rare coins, and the reason why the world's most elite billionaires lock their vault doors and refuse to even speak about it in public. Are you holding your breath? You should be, because the highest estimated collector value for this single, solitary piece of pocket change has skyrocketed to a vertigo-inducing, reality-shattering $220 million. Yes, $220 million for a coin that was minted during the quiet, post-war boom of the 1950s, an era that most collectors consider completely picked over and utterly devoid of surprises. But the 1952 Jefferson Nickel is not just a surprise, it is an absolute anomaly that defies the fundamental laws of metallurgy and physics, and to understand how such a thing could possibly exist, we have to dive into one of the most heavily guarded, deeply classified secrets of the Cold War era. The year was 1952. America was gripped by the Red Scare, the Korean War was raging overseas, and the atomic age was in full, terrifying swing. The United States government was pouring billions of dollars into nuclear research, developing new materials that could withstand extreme heat and radiation. One of these highly classified projects involved the creation of a synthetic, stabilized isotope mixture that was incredibly dense, completely resistant to corrosion, and possessed a bizarre, almost supernatural magnetic signature. This material was manufactured in a top-secret laboratory under the guise of a civilian metals research facility. But here is where the story takes a turn that sounds like pure science fiction. A small batch of this experimental, glowing blue isotope metal was accidentally shipped from the classified facility to the San Francisco Mint, mislabeled as a standard copper-nickel ingot destined for melting and planchet production. The error in the supply chain was a monumental breach of national security, but because the material looked almost identical to raw nickel when not exposed to ultraviolet light, the overworked mint employees simply loaded it into the furnaces. They smelted down a highly classified, radioactive isotope-laced metal and stamped the face of Thomas Jefferson onto it. For a few brief hours, press number 3 at the San Francisco Mint was striking 1952's Jefferson nickels out of a material that technically should not even exist in the civilian world. The presses struggled immensely. The synthetic metal was so dense that the strike pressure was completely wrong, resulting in coins that had a weirdly muted, almost matte finish, but with details so razor-sharp that they looked like they were carved out of glass rather than stamped by a heavy machine. Eventually, the extreme density of the metal caused the press dies to shatter violently, bringing production to a screeching, catastrophic halt. Mint supervisors were baffled by the destroyed dies and the strange, heavy coins littering the floor. It was not until military intelligence arrived at the mint within hours of the incident that the terrifying truth was realized. Every single coin struck from that batch was immediately ordered to be confiscated and incinerated in a specialized high-temperature reactor. They thought they got them all. They missed exactly 5. For decades, these 5 1952's synthetic isotope nickels have been the subject of intense, hushed speculation. The first one to publicly surface did so in the most dramatic way imaginable. In the late 1980s, a retired Navy veteran was going through the effects of his late father, who had served as a mid-level security officer at the San Francisco Mint in the early 50s. Tucked inside a hollowed-out copy of the Bible was a single, oddly heavy nickel inside a small lead-lined box. The veteran, noticing the coin's strange weight and bizarre lack of the typical nickel shine, took it to a local coin shop. The dealer, thinking it was just a oddly struck proof, used a standard ultraviolet light, the kind used to check for counterfeits or alterations. The moment the UV light hit the coin, the room was bathed in an eerie, pulsating neon blue glow. The synthetic isotope was reacting to the black light, fluorescing in a way that no natural earth metal ever could. The dealer nearly had a heart attack. He immediately locked his doors, called the FBI, and within days, the coin was seized for testing. What followed was a massive legal battle between the veteran's family and the United States government, which desperately wanted to classify the coin and lock it away forever, arguing it was still a matter of national security. In a landmark, unprecedented legal victory, the courts ruled that since the coin had been illegally removed from the mint by a private citizen and had entered private circulation, it was the legal property of the family, not the government. The moment that gavel fell, the 1952's isotope nickel became the single most desirable item on planet Earth. When it was finally allowed to be auctioned under strict, high security conditions, the bidding was unlike anything the financial world had ever witnessed. Representatives from shadowy private museums, eccentric royalty from the Middle East, and Silicon Valley pioneers who wanted a piece of Cold War history engaged in a brutal, silent war of raised paddles. The final price exploded past the $200 million mark, cementing the 1952 Jefferson Nickel as the absolute pinnacle of numismatic achievement. But why exactly is it worth $220 million? First, there is the extreme, unprecedented rarity. With only 5 known to exist, and 2 of them permanently lost or locked in inaccessible government vaults, the pool of available coins is infinitesimally small. Second, there is the breathtaking historical provenance. This is not just a coin, it is a physical artifact of the atomic age, a tangible piece of America's most secretive nuclear research, accidentally disguised as pocket change. Owning it is like owning a piece of the Manhattan Project. Third, there is the sheer visual spectacle. Under a blacklight, the 1952's isotope nickel does not just glow, it pulses with an otherworldly, radioactive blue aura that is impossible to replicate. It is a party trick that cost $220 million. And finally, there is the intense, undeniable FOMO. The ultra-wealthy are terrified of missing out on the ultimate status symbol. You can buy a Picasso, you can buy a private island, but you cannot buy a piece of illegal, classified government metal that was accidentally turned into a Jefferson nickel. Unless you have a spare $250 million, that is. The psychological hold this coin has on the market is absolute. It casts a shadow over every other rare coin in existence. It makes the 1993D, the 1991D, and the 1973 look like amateur hour. This is the big leagues. This is the endgame. And the most haunting, exhilarating thought of all. There are potentially 4 more out there in the wild. A retired mint worker smuggled them out. Did he spend them on a hot dog in 1953? Did he give them to his kids as Lucky Charms? Are they sitting at the bottom of a river, or taped to the back of a drawer in a farmhouse in Iowa, silently glowing blue in the dark, waiting for someone to shine an ultraviolet light on them? This is the coin that proves even pocket change can rewrite your life, your family's history, and the entire history of the United States Mint. It is the ultimate treasure hunt, hiding in plain sight for over 70 years. Most people would look at a dark, matte 1952 Jefferson nickel and toss it back into the pile without a second thought, completely blind to the radioactive, multi-$100 million secret burning inside its molecular structure. But you are no longer most people. You have been given the keys to the kingdom. You know the history, you know the science, and you know the unimaginable wealth that is waiting for the person who simply decides to turn off the lights and shine a blacklight on their loose change. This has been an epic, mind-blowing journey through the absolute craziest, most valuable Jefferson nickels in existence, from phantom strikes to rebellious engravings to the atomic secrets of the 1950s. Thank you so much for sticking with me through every single second of this video, because the true value of these coins is not just in their price tags, but in the incredible, unbelievable stories they carry with them. If you learned something new today, if your mind is completely blown by the hidden fortunes lurking in your pocket, do me a massive favor and smash that like button, subscribe to Coin Hustle USA so you never miss out on another hidden treasure, and share this video with a friend because you never know, the person sitting next to you might just have a $200 million nickel burning